We're gonna mention. I just need to know ahead of time. There you go.
Hey guys, welcome back to the program. This is one of our first shows, so our introduction is going to be a little bit wonky, but I am Rob Rayborn. I am a licensed psychotherapist here in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm here with my good friend, Ryan Redmond.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Ryan Redmond. I own Eagle One here. I'm a small business owner in Richmond, Virginia. And yeah, we're excited to do the radio show and interview our friend Carl here and kind of get to know him more, his story, and how he got into owning his own business.
Yeah, so thanks for tuning into the Catalyst, and we'll just start off right here. Carl, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about the business you run and how you get to be so lucky to know the two of us.
All right. Well, I mean, my name's Carl Memmer, licensed professional counselor, just like Rob. We both work at the same practice. Name of the practice is Resilience Counseling and Social Skills Center. We currently have 3 physical locations in Virginia, one in Fredericksburg, one in Glen Allen, West End near Short Pump, and then in Chesterfield County in Midlothian. And we currently employ just about 60 clinicians, a mixture of talk therapists, psychologists who do psychological testing, and then we also have psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners who provide medication management services to our clients. So we can really provide wraparound mental health services on an outpatient basis to any clients that are interested in our services.
So cool. And Carl, when did you get started with Resilience? And what's the basic story of even this concept of calling your practice Resilience Counseling?
Yeah, so the practice itself was incorporated in November of 2017 and came from a background of doing community-based counseling, where I was doing supervision, program directing, and then opening satellite locations for another company here in Richmond, Virginia. And then I was also doing private practice at an outpatient group, nights, weekends, and really kind of working 80, 90 hours a week.
Yeah.
It really wasn't sustainable for a long haul. And my wife and I were expecting our first child, so it wasn't really realistic to keep doing that and then also fulfill the father role and being able to be more present.
All the demands of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. So, just kind of took assessment of what I had going on, different skill sets, lots of things I've been grateful for over the years in terms of learning business management, practice management, and all that other kind of stuff from the past 2 employers I was with. So I decided to take the leap, open my own practice, and I had the original intention of being a solo provider, because kind of being in the management portion of a community-based counseling center basically just became a lot of hiring, training. Yep. It's a high burnout field. So that basically became my job. And then you're kind of having to manage those folks as you go through. And there's just a lot of things that pop up as you go, especially when you have such a high attrition rate. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that you have to micromanage as you go, along with replacing staff, constantly training staff, and so on and so forth. So really, I just kind of wanted to be a solo kind of thing when we first got started. I was able to start it nicely because I had, open honest conversations with my employer at the time. They were totally supportive of it, which was great. And I was able to kind of do an additional amount of time there while they were hiring somebody to kind of take the reins with what I was doing. So we got it going. Probably around March is when it officially launched, March 2018. I had a coworker, Christina, who's still at the practice.
She's great.
We basically went through our residency together, even across agencies. It wasn't always intentional, but we just kind of ended up different places. I was talking to her about what I was going to do, and it turned out she was also looking to get into private practice as well. She was interviewing at places, maybe not finding something that she felt was a good fit, but also she didn't really want to get involved in the business aspect of private practice, but really, really wanted to focus her time on doing individualized clinical work with clients. So we had the crazy idea of, hey, you want to do this with me?
Yeah.
I wanted to move my family down to Richmond. We were in Fredericksburg at the time.
And she made a big jump too then, right? Because she was doing the same thing as you prior.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, she was doing supervision, she's doing clinical work, all that kind of stuff. So we decided to get her a little closet space in Fredericksburg, and I got one in Richmond. She got full super fast because she had a stellar reputation in the community that she built. She probably had a wait list within 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, not a bad place to be in.
Yeah. It took a little longer down in the Richmond market because I had no prior reputation here. It's a bigger market, harder to break into, but ultimately it was successful.
So tell us a little bit about resilience. This it's such a great, powerful term.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, when looking for a name of a practice, it was kind of difficult. It was probably the thing that took the longest, like landing on something. You want it to be genuinely what you're about, kind of something that represents what your practice is like, what you want that logo to represent to the community. And it has to be genuine, right? So you can't just kind of fish around for a cool name and then not have it mean anything. So ultimately we landed on resilience because I think that's a big aspect of counseling, right? You're working with individuals and you want to help lead them or develop skills that they probably already have, really, right? Sometimes it's a lot of self-doubt and self-confidence kind of things that people really do have the capability to overcome.
They just need guidance from you guys.
Yeah, sometimes just a little encouragement goes a long way for folks. And, a lot of people are lacking in that in their immediate circle of people just tell them, you got this kind of thing. You could definitely do it. Just kind of working out the details and stuff like that. So resilience, I feel, really represents that kind of mindset, right? You come into counseling and sometimes people will tell you stories and you're just like, man, I don't know how you're getting out of bed in the morning. It's like pretty amazing you're already doing that.
But almost like inspired by their story.
Absolutely. I mean, that happens over and over and over again, right? You just listen to people's stories and you're just blown away, right? 100%. And then being privy to or watching them over time overcome whatever those obstacles are, be successful, live their lives in the way that they want to live, is really rewarding. And that's just kind of the idea of resilience itself, right?
Even using that concept of resilience has really helped to guide my practice as I've further kind of understood that the human condition as a person enters into therapy. A lot of individuals become discouraged despite working hard on themselves and coming week after week to meet with their clinician because a challenge of some sort that has presented themselves, it's hit them again, and they're like, I've fallen again, or I've struggled again, or I just can't seem to have, not having these episodes. I'm like, we're not focusing on whether or not you're having the episodes. We're tracking the time it takes for you to have this bounce back to thriving or to normalcy. And as you can see, like over time, because of the strength that you're building, your recovery periods are shortening, and that's been such an encouragement with our practice.
Yeah, and I think because I guess we're business and kind of business psychology and kind of inspiring people, that kind of translates to business too. And you opened and ran your own business, and it's very successful. Like, any tips, either of you guys? Any tips on how to kind of overcome? Because people get hit with adversity in business, life. We deal with it. We deal with it all the time. We've all dealt with it here. Any tips on kind of how to overcome adversity when it comes knocking on the door?
Oh, that's a great question.
I know.
Well, part of it is I would assume is making sure that you're building up a good team, like people who've got your got your back with your vision. And I am kind of interested, like who are those practical people, like the non-clinicians that you've put together that kind of kept you going and kept you, bouncing back and keeping focus on
the
business.
Or friends and family, whatever.
For sure. So, there was a certain point, I think it was like when we had 15 clinicians on the team. And when we started, we were pretty much, everybody was more or less self-reliant, right? Like we had this team of clinicians, but everybody was more or less managing themselves. And I was answering all the calls, right? So I was therapist.
Wore a lot of hats.
Billing, claims, scheduling,
very common for new
everything.
Yep.
But, it gave us, I think, a little competitive advantage there because it was so personal. I was answering the phones, giving people calls back. And then all the clinicians like Rob, Josh, Christina, Marianne, all the folks who were kind of like the original small group cast were also like so highly confident and really jive with the practice, because what people were after, in my view, one thing was like freedom and autonomy, but at the same time, they genuinely thrived in that freedom and autonomy because you really need to purchase that with your responsibility. And that's what they were doing, right? They were doing all their own scheduling, all their own bookings, all the management, taking their own calls, all that kind of stuff. But it did get to a certain point where we blew up in terms of the phones ringing off the hooks. It wasn't really feasible anymore. So it came to that point of growth where we definitely needed to grow out the administrative team. And I still believe to this day, it still is the hardest positions to hire for. You know, you look for therapists, and of course, it's a tough process, but you know, you kind of have some reassurance that there's this kind of basis layer of competence. You've got a master's degree at least, sometimes several, sometimes 5,000 certifications, whatever it is, right? But when you post for an admin, you get like 2,500, 3,000 applicants, and you have to sort through them all, and you have a much higher rate of people not even showing up to the interview. It's a lot, very time consuming. Plus, it's one of the most important positions at the practice. That's the first person that somebody hears when they interact with their business.
Face of business, right?
Right. Yeah. And, you know, I kind of joke sometimes when I'm doing those interviews. I was like, hey, if you ever want to find the most miserable people possible, you go to the doctor's office, and especially if they haven't had their coffee yet, to make you feel like you're doing something wrong when you show up for your yearly physical. Right. And that's, you know, that's just a joke. It's humor, but it happens enough where that's part of what people feel when you're interacting with it. So for mental health, especially, people are calling you not because things are going swimmingly in their lives. And that's the first point of contact. So if that doesn't go well, then they're calling somewhere else. They're not calling back. They're not recommending your practice to anybody else. So part of what's been important to us is being responsive, getting back to people, answering the phone. Even if we can't help, we provide other options for them. So I'd say in terms of support staff, Lori, our practice manager now, was the first one. And she actually applied to the job. I had an Indeed posting. I had 2,500 applicants probably right in front of my face. I was kind of feeling down on that because I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to sort through all this and find a good candidate for like one of the most important positions that would be a brand new thing, right? To be a pioneer of this position. And Lori emails separately, totally separate of Indeed. I forget the story of how she found out about us, but she did. And she emailed and she was almost apologetic. She's like, I know it's not through the ad, but I'm just applying here. And I think it got lost in the mailu. And then I feel like she re-upped the email. Hey, just, you know, doing this. And I'm like, okay, this is a gold indicator. Somebody who's willing to follow up.
And it's interesting, like it's when people are looking for work, are they willing to do that to kind of find employment? And just kind of that site.
So, you know, I didn't even look at any of the 2,500 resumes. I just went with Lori. I'm like, okay, here we go.
They took initiative. They'll be a good employee.
It just starts fitting into like a culture that you're trying to build. You're like, God, you know, I relate to this. I relate to this, you know, desire to push and make myself known.
Yeah, absolutely. The interview went great. You know, she had a personal background with different things in her field, and you could tell she was genuinely passionate about doing the job that she's doing, and she's done a great job of building out that team. So obviously that was kind of a pivotal growth point to be able to have that administrative team grow out to focus on other things.
So I think a concern, and we're the catalyst, it's kind of like what the catalyst is for opening a new business, but also overcoming adversity. So like you kind of talked about, a lot of people worry about like growing their business. You had to come to Richmond and kind of expand your business here with little to no clientele that you knew or had good representation. And you're an amazing counselor and amazing business owner. Like, any advice for anybody in a similar situation where they have to, how did you do it? Any advice in that situation for somebody opening a business and kind of trying to expand their market and get clients?
Right. Yeah, I would say it just goes back to real basic principles. You don't want to overthink things. And I think part of growing up, my parents did instill good work ethic, right? So they're like, hey, if you're going to do something, even if you're scrubbing the toilet bowl, you're going to be the best damn toilet scrubber there is, right?
My parents told me that's so funny.
Yeah. And it's like you take pride.
Translates, right? It's so
exactly, right? Like you take pride in what you do. And I think a rare commodity nowadays are people who are willing to put in that work ethic, be reliable, make personal connections. That's how you build trust with people. And when you can repeat that over time, then people are ringing your phone, right? So like, let's say a case manager or discharge manager from a hospital, they have 5 practices in front of them. If 4 of them never answer the phone, but you do, who are they going to call, right? So it's just basic stuff like that. You know, present yourself well, be good at what you do, be able to articulate what you do and what value are you going to bring to whoever you're talking to.
Yeah. And another thing I'd like to, you kind of already went on, touch base on it. So turnover. So you came, I've known you for a while. You came from counseling companies that had multiple turnover. You said there was a big issue there. So you kind of touched base on it, like, how are you different? So you don't really have much turnover in those positions at all. Everyone seems, the culture there is great. What would you attribute that to? Like, very simply, what would you attribute that you are doing different that is accumulating to no turnover or little turnover?
Yeah, well, you know, to be fair, part of that problem was just the work that was being done in community-based counseling. A lot of it's tail wag the dog kind of stuff, the rules that every practice like that has to follow. But then also the nature of the work was much different than outpatient counseling, which is tough, right? You're driving around.
It's trying.
Yeah.
It's physically and mentally exhausting.
Yep. Doesn't pay well. You're like totally inexperienced, but you're working with the most high-risk populations there are. So you're just being thrown into the trenches basically. So, the high attrition rate had to do with that, had to do with, the pay is not always that great. You're driving all around, and it's really tough work. Like, it's not for everybody. It actually became part of my interview strategy. Initially I would be like, okay, I'm gonna, when you're interviewing, you're in that role of a company, you're highlighting all the good stuff, you're trying to attract people to work there. But I also found that was a losing strategy. So what I would do is begin to balance that with the reality. Like, okay, here's all the good things. Now let me tell you about what the reality is.
Yeah,
right?
out of the job.
Yeah, and I came up with this term, the deer in headlights effect, right? Whereas, like, I'm telling you, like, people come in, they do training, everybody's happy. If those first 2 weeks, if you weren't coming into the office looking fully traumatized, like a deer in headlights, and something's wrong, right? And I would kind of go through, like, this is going to be tough. You're going to show up to different places. People aren't going to answer the door. You're not going to get paid for it. And then of course I would relate that to why it was deeply meaningful and why you would acquire through your residency some really, priceless experience. So
you learn to not fear rejection, essentially.
Yeah, right. And you get the basic principles too, because you really have to connect with people. And that's the big part of in-home counseling. Like, you could be Sigmund Freud, totally clinical. People don't like you. They're not opening the door.
It's funny in business too. It's like people want to do business who they like, who they trust. And I'm sure it's the same in your world, right? You want to retain clients. There's got to be some trust factor there. They want to like you, talk to you, want to be willing to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of get to what the question was, is how have you taken that? Well, in my mind, right, how I've taken my experiences to try to build something from the onset, which was like, okay, here were some of the pros of what I was doing, some of the cons. This is what I liked and didn't like. And then also hearing from other successful people who came from community-based, how can you create a private practice structure with most of the pros and reducing the cons? Some of it's inevitable, but how do you create, basically, the big thing people want is the sense of autonomy, right? Like, if you're a clinician, right, psychology is technically a science, but I would also argue it's kind of an art too, right? So somebody like Rob is not going to practice anything like any other clinician, right? He's a unique clinician, right? Just like everybody is.
Rob is very unique, yeah.
So you want to be able to provide an environment where he can do the things that he's passionate about without having to follow all these rules that seem arbitrary or bureaucratic. That burns people out, right? Community-based, like, here's words you can use, here's words you can't use. If you do this, you have to actually write it like this, right? And people, you get tired of that, right? Because you spend your time doing things.
You feel like you're a cog in the machine.
You lose yourself, and it's exactly it. You signed up to be this highly unique and passionate individual, and then you can, unfortunately, if it's run the way it's sometimes designed to be run, you start to lose yourself and see yourself as a dog.
What I like about what both of you guys do and your business model is it's very much like you've already touched base on it, but it's very much kind of, they have complete autonomy to kind of do what they need to within certain restrictions, obviously, but to expand their business and grow their business. And it kind of fits part of your culture. And I just love that. It's like totally opposite of what you came up with in the kind of the counseling world.
Yeah, right. And I think if you have a unique set of providers, it's going to match the community, everybody calling for help is going to have a unique situation, and people really enjoy, they go on our website, they see those pictures of everybody, their profiles. Lots of people call and say, hey, I want to work with this person, right? You've already kind of built a connection. They're excited about it. It's pretty tough picking up that phone call anyway, as it is. So it's just kind of helped bridge that gap. And then when we're able to deliver on it, like, oh my gosh, you guys answered the phone. You guys will talk to me. You guys take my insurance. You guys have
you say what you're going to do. And that always involves trust too.
And that gets difficult over time. But then the other thing is, when you screw up, which you inevitably will, it's like you're honest with people. You're like, we did drop the ball on that. We're going to make it right. Whatever it is, right? So that's a big part of it too.
Speaking of uniqueness, like in our professional delivery and our relationships with others, what is it, maybe from the beginning, or maybe as you started to evolve as a business owner, that you started to think to yourself, this is what I'm going to do to set me apart from either how I was treated as an employee when I was working with for-profit community-based, or this is what I'm going to do to set myself and the practice apart from other known practices.
Yeah, I think it just kind of goes back to even coming up with the name. I just think it has to be genuine, right? And then you kind of see that through. And I think part of it, as we've grown in the current growing pains, is like, okay, there has to be rules and protocols, because then also, chaos ensues with that too. So I think that's kind of where we're at the moment. It's like, okay, we have to put some coherent policies and procedures together. We've got 60 people. It's not 5 people anymore. But then also not losing what I would say the soul of your practice while doing that, right? Because you don't want it to feel like there's a bean counter and there's somebody over your back, like you didn't do this many sessions and blah, 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 blah. And that's not what we're after. So I think it's just a constant balancing act of, having people feel as though, hey, I'm there. I'm able to see whatever my passion is through in helping the communities of folks that I want. I've got these set of rules to abide by. As long as I, do my documentation, get these things done, everything's great. We're able to have a little bit of fun in the process.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think we're getting up on time, so I just kind of want to wrap it up with a few things. So anybody out, you were in that situation where you're working 80 hours, working about 80 hours a week, probably not making near the amount of money you could for your new family. We got people, listeners who are in that same exact situation. What advice would you give them to make the jump? Because some people are going to make the jump and start their own business. Some are going to regret it. Some might figure it out in that environment. Like, what advice would you give to somebody who's like, I want to make it, but just not sure yet?
Yeah, well, number one, I would say don't burn bridges, right? Relationships are important for sure. You never know when you're doing your own thing. It's like, oh, I got to go talk to so-and-so from 5 years ago, right?
Yep.
If you maintain that relationship, that could be, who knows, randomly things pop up and before you know it, doors open and you're good to go. The other thing I would say in the beginning, that's going to be the scariest part. That's going to be the part where you're most uncertain of things.
There's like highs and lows every day.
Yep. Seek out mentorship, professional relationships, talk to people. But then also things are going to happen that seem like the end of the world. But when you zoom out, whether it be 6 months, a year later, you're like, oh man, I actually appreciate the fact that happened.
Can you give us an example of something that just seemed like the sky is falling?
Yeah, for sure. Right when I was before I was at the employer I was at when I started the practice, I was basically at this other place where I was, and grateful for the opportunity. I learned so much. I was directing, supervising, and seeing more clients than most people were, just kind of being clinicians. It's burning both ends of the stick. When you put yourself in that situation, sometimes you get in this phrase like, oh, I'm working so hard. They know I'm doing 200%. I'm good, right?
Yeah.
But, something's got to give. So, documentation and stuff I would fall behind on. And ultimately, it came to a point where there's a curveball one day. I went in, and they're like, "Yeah, you're pretty much fired, right?
Yeah,
you're getting your documentation done,
fired.
right?" And it was shocking, right? Because like, well, I'm doing the work of like 10 people. You guys knew that this would kind of happen, but you kept piling things on, and it's not all their fault. I was participating in that, but that was it, right? And my wife was like 8.5 months pregnant, just lost my income basically, right? Felt like the end of the world. I was upset for a day, and I was like, okay, well, I got to get up, get my resume together, get things out. Felt like nothing was going to come together. And then 2 days later, I got a call from the other place. They're like, yeah, we want you to do this particular job for way more money, and you're just going to be doing that, right? I was like, oh, wow, okay. So this works.
I didn't even know it existed prior to that conversation.
Right.
Like you think the sky is falling, you're like, oh, this much better business model makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So things come together, but pretty scary in the meantime.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it certainly helps you be, compassionate to what other therapists might be going through, especially the ones that are a little more green. If they're getting behind on their documentation, you're not cracking the whip on them, but you're strongly advising them, like, look, I know how this one plays out.
Oh, yeah.
But you're able to do it in such a way that your therapists feel seen and heard and cared for, and not that you're disappointed or upset with them.
I think we're wrapping up on time here. Carl, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah,
we appreciate it. Rob, any words of encouragement or advice for everybody as they kind of go into the week? Doesn't make you do it again.
Well, I'd advise people to check out resilience counseling. What's the best way to check out our practice, Carl? If people are just interested in learning more.
Yeah, so go to our website, resiliencecounseling.care. We have different sections. We've tried to make it as clear and simple as possible. Get the most information you can. You could submit a form through our website, send us an email, give us a call if you're interested in scheduling or have any questions, and we'll be happy to help you.
Or if you just want to meet us, which I completely understand.
Yeah. Well, appreciate having on Carl. Rob, it's fun as always. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, y'all.